Okay, now the stats have loaded from the round of 16, so we are going to be giving you the matchup stream now. We're going to be going down all of the matches for next weekend. And now Dio has left, and I'm now going to be joined by iFlame. How you doing, iFlame?
Doing well, doing well. Looking forward to some matchups.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a great weekend. We've got a lot on our plate. Still have 8 matchups because no players have been eliminated just yet. So, going to be going top down on the list. I think we're going to be starting out now with Mustache versus Taquito.
Yeah, Mustache is coming in as the 16th seed here. Is, I think, going to have somewhat of a tough time into Taquito. It is an interesting matchup because Mustache is probably going to be looking to abuse the DTs as much as possible, whereas Taquito, I think, is going to be having a little bit of a better time on things like these kind of low AR hiddens, possibly some of the more gimmicky picks, and some of the no mods as well.
Honestly, I'm going to disagree with you there a bit. I don't think Mustache is really going to pick speed into Taquito, although Taquito hasn't really been looking at his peak in terms of speed. It's not a skill set that Mustache is really going to pick either. I think he's more going to look for the HRs and the no-mods, probably going to go for things like no-mod 2, as well as probably sweeping through the hard rock pool. I think having a more aim-oriented HR1 going to be good for him, and I think his real key to victory in this matchup is going to be in HR and aim. Taquito's probably going to ban it out. It's something that is Taquito's less favored skill set versus Mustache's better skill sets, although I do think when it comes to being well-rounded, Taquito should probably have a pretty good time in this matchup, being so good at hidden, so good at mechanics, so good at tech, but we're going to really have to see because Mustache really has a key because of his strength and Taquito's weakness.
Yeah, I would agree. And just for the viewers, when you're looking at the stats, the blue bar are their previous scores, and the colored bars are the increases based off of their recent matches.
Mm-hmm. Now I believe we are going to be going on into our next matchup here. We have got MX 10001, also known as Karcher, versus Demonica. Both of these players having, honestly, a pretty rough go at things. Demonica taking WhiteCat pretty far in this matchup, but Karcher being thoroughly outplayed by Swaggi in what I think was a surprising match for a lot of people.
Yeah, that one ended up 6-1, and Demonica, like you mentioned, looked surprisingly good and did a lot better than most people expected. And it's not like WhiteCat underperformed massively either. Demonica, I just thought, played really well. And so while normally I would give the edge to Karcher, 9 times out of 10 in this matchup, based off this week's matches, I would honestly say it's pretty close.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, when it comes to skill set strength, I think these players overlap a ton. Both of these guys are extremely strong mechanics players who aren't really very strong on reading, probably not going to see anyone want to touch any of the Nomad 6 hidden 2. But when it comes to things like Hard Rock, DT, the Nomads, these guys are top tier, and it's going to be, I think, a really close match on a lot of those maps. Obviously, Karcher, if you've been reading his Twitter, if you've been seeing what he's been saying, not as motivated to play hard as of late, while Demonica maybe having a little more motivation, maybe a little fewer lag spikes, might be able to make up the difference in what I think many people would perceive as a very Karcher-favored matchup. But I think it's going to be really interesting. We're going to have to see.
Yeah, I would still probably give Karcher a slight edge, probably a little bit stronger on some of the hiddens than Demonica. Karcher's going to be looking to pick those stream-focused maps, but I think Demonica has gained some much-needed confidence after the match with WhiteCat.
Yeah, and when you have people who overlap in skill sets as heavily as these two, typically what you see in matches is guys are going to test the waters. We're going to see one of these guys maybe grind the reading maps, and I think it's going to be really cool to see if either of them decide to opt into it.
I mean, especially if you're Demonica, right? You know that Karcher isn't necessarily trying as hard. You can reasonably expect that Karcher probably isn't the one grinding the reading map, and so that might be an option for Demonica.
Yeah, totally. Gonna be really excited to see how this plays out. It's insane that this is a loser's bracket match, honestly. Like, the fact that any of these players are in loser's bracket round 1, it's just like, we have 16 of the best players in the world. That's what I have to constantly remind myself when I'm casting this tournament. Like, these guys are at the top of the game, and they are facing only people who are also at the top of the game, so it's crazy.
Yeah, it is so stacked. For our next matchup, we have got Crystal versus Emrak. Emrak did lose to Chiken, I think what most people would consider to be a bit of an upset, dropping 6-3. Of course, Crystal did have a really brutal match against Emrak, so that was kind of lost regardless. But I think Crystal has had some good tournament performances lately and could certainly put up a good fight here.
Yeah, I think a lot of this match is going to come down to if Crystal is going to be able to win his picks, because Emrak here with a very obvious advantage on speed and stamina at this star rating against Crystal. Although Crystal is extremely consistent, I would say on some of the maps that we saw MCY be really consistent on, he's really good at all tech, some hard rocks, probably one of the best HR tourney players in the game. And I think that strength kind of overlaps with something that we don't really see Emrak pick that often. That precision stat for Crystal, 7.7 compared to Enri's 4. But when it comes to being well-rounded, I think Emrak probably has a slight edge in this match. Definitely has more options to take break points against Crystal, with also having safer picks, going to be able to go for speed against Crystal, and I think should probably be pretty decisively favored towards Emrak. But as I said, if Crystal can manage to win this picks, I could see this match going the distance, maybe.
I would have to agree. I feel like just based off of stats so far, this is probably going to be one of our more one-sided losers bracket matchups. Crystal, like you said, has options in the HR picks. Could look to pick things like the tech, but I think Emrak is generally going to be stronger in speed, in rating, and it's really tough to ban out speed and rating. Generally, you can ban one of them. So if you have the advantage in both speed and rating, that's going to be, in most pools, 2 free points, and from there you just have to find a few other maps to win.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. It's gonna be really hard banning if you're Crystal. I think Crystal probably has a better shot on the reading maps than the speed maps against Emrak. For sure. Maybe like I think this No Mod 6 is very learnable, and if Crystal manages to learn it, he could convert that into a potential break point, or something that nobody touches, because that map is just really scary. But the speed definitely probably going to be this thing that Crystal bans out, because it's just very much a weakness versus a strength here between these two players.
Yep. For our final losers bracket matchup, we have got Ninerik versus MCY4.
Now, Ninerik, unfortunately having some mouse issues, had to FF his match this week, so we haven't seen him play yet in the bracket stage. But definitely you can see what the trend of this match is really gonna be. Ninerik has the gold bar on speed and stamina, meaning he has the top performances on both of those skill sets against MCY. And as we just saw, MCY not really the best at speed and stamina, gonna be promptly dropping the ban hammer on probably the two speediest maps in the pool. But when it comes to other skill sets, I think MCY probably has an edge. Although Ninerik is honestly underratedly well-rounded. I've seen him play well on some hidden 3 style picks. I think very good at flow aim. Probably gonna pick maps like Nomad 2. Maybe not aim. I think MCY probably gonna go for aim and gimmick, but this is a match that I'm sure is gonna be extremely interesting based on these players' strong suits.
Yeah, I do think the speed is going to be two obvious bans for MCY. I mean, even before looking at the pool too deeply, I think you can reasonably expect just DT2 and No Mod 5 bans out of MCY4 in that match. And I do think Ninerik, like you said, is pretty well-rounded. But I do feel like MCY's, finger control is a little bit better than the stats show, in my opinion. So I do think a lot of these alt maps are going to be very highly contested between these two players and could go either way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fact that we have yet to see a DT4 in the map pool, meaning there's fewer DT maps, MCY is really going to get to strike out his weaknesses in this matchup. And also just the fact that Ninerik is coming off some technical difficulties. His mouse is not really working, needs to get a new mouse. He's going to be maybe a little less confident coming into this matchup. I think it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle for him, but definitely when playing at his best, this is the type of matchup that Ninerik, I think, can play well in. But I think we just have to edge it over to MCY4 in this matchup.
Yeah, I think Ninerik did say as well they'd be getting their mouse in about a week, so that'd be pretty much right before the match. So I think it's a little bit worrying for Ninerik in the sense that depending on how fast the mouse gets there, it's probably going to have very, very little time to practice on top of the adjustment period of getting a new mouse. But we'll have to see how that plays out.
Definitely going to be an interesting one. Now, on to the winners bracket matches. We're going to be starting off with a battle of two titans who looked pretty unbeatable in their matches this weekend. We've got Malachevsky versus Zuri. Now, oh my god. This is a matchup we could talk about for a while. Obviously, these players have been so good recently. Both very much the best tourney players in their country. And now look at these stats. Malachevsky #1 on every single stat besides speed and stamina, which Ninerik held the top on. Now, what the hell do you do against that if you're Zuri?
Yeah, I'm willing to bet, you look at the speed and stamina, he's probably #2 or #3 at the absolute worst. I think Zuri has some strong potential picks in things like the aim, the tech. We could see her look to abuse the hidden, but as good as Zuri is at the hidden, she's not really much of a rating player. She doesn't really play a lot of those kind of low AR maps. And so I could see Malachevsky realistically having an advantage on the rating picks as well. And Zuri is a very, very strong player. But what can you do against Malachevsky? Malachevsky has just been so dominant in every single tournament lately. He is at the top of his game. And I expect the dominance to continue as the tournament goes on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Zuri, the thing with Zuri is she is extremely strong. We saw this against Taquito, but I feel like Zuri trying to pick into Malachevsky is going to have the same issues of Taquito trying to pick into Zuri if you watch that match. It's not that Zuri is going to perform badly on her picks and just get blown out of the water by Malachevsky. She's just going to be picking maps that she's good on, but Malachevsky's better. It's going to be like, you cannot miss against Malachevsky. Malachevsky will outscore you. He will get better AC on every single map. He is just so dominant. We saw this matchup in round table as well in the qualifier tournament. And Malachevsky, even though Zuri was playing really well, I believe getting a couple of points, Malachevsky's just he just doesn't miss. When he does miss, he'll find 1 or 2 maps in the match to miss on, and Zuri will probably win them. But when Malachevsky's on his game, there's nothing you can do. This is the most dominant tournament player we have ever seen, and I think he's still going to win this match.
Yeah, I think it's especially tough for Zuri, even just in a stylistic sense. I feel like it's a pretty bad matchup for her. You look at the skills that Zuri is good at, the aim, the tech, the hidden, and Malachevsky is just as good at all of them. So on your own picks, they're going to be coin flips at best for the most part, whereas in the areas that Malachevsky has advantages, notably the speed and stamina, it feels like a very, very big advantage in the sense that it's just going to be free points for Malachevsky. And so Zuri really cannot afford to drop a single one of her own picks if she wants any chance of winning the match.
Yeah, however, one thing I will acknowledge is that Zuri on extreme precision tends to actually have an edge over Malachevsky. I think a lot of that
for sure.
Her full area playstyle very much suited towards CS 8 or 7 and above, but we don't really get to that in this quarterfinals map pool, so not going to be as definitive of a pick for Zuri, but still definitely a matchup that you want to see because Zuri has a chip on her shoulder. She's lost to Malachevsky before. She wants her revenge, and I am all for seeing someone come close to Malachevsky for the first time in a year.
Certainly hope so, and while I do like the precision, because there tends to be only one precision map in the pool, it's going to be pretty easy for Malachevsky to ban that out if he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for our next winner's bracket match, I think this is going to be one of, if not the best matchup of the next round. It is Swaggi versus WhiteCat.
All right, now, obviously, the question we have with WhiteCat is he going to practice? Now, we kind of had a question mark after this week in his win against Demonica. Still looked strong on a few picks, FCing that Nomad 3. I think if he doesn't practice, I think Swaggi, if anyone is going to drop him down, it's going to be him. Swaggi has been playing absolutely out of his mind, dominating in his matchup in the first round. Gonna look to probably stick it to WhiteCat here. I mean, when it comes to picks here, I feel like both these players overlap a lot. Swaggi, an insane aim and tech player, but also WhiteCat, insane aim and tech player. I think it's going to be a dogfight in this match where both of these players are going to be good at the same things. Except we look at the stats here, we see the speed and the stamina going heavily in favor of WhiteCat, and we don't really see him picking those that often. So we're going to see if he decides to go into that against Swaggi. Going to be curious for sure.
Yeah, because Swaggi is not really much of a speed or stamina player, as you can see in the stats. And so even though WhiteCat is not necessarily a speed or stamina player himself, I think he's going to be pretty advantaged on those picks over Swaggi, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Swaggi ban one of those picks out. Where I do think Swaggi may have the advantage is in those reading picks, because Swaggi is the type of player that is going to practice for this matchup, is not going to be taking it lightly, and if WhiteCat doesn't put a lot of time into practice, Swaggi could very, very easily do really well on the rating picks. The Nomad 6, even possibly the low AR hidden pick as well. I think Swaggi could be advantaged on. And I think another question for WhiteCat is the consistency, right? And that does come down to the practice a little bit, but WhiteCat had some very impressive scores on certain maps against Demonica, and there was other maps where he was just really inconsistent, found some really random misses. But I do think if we see WhiteCat's consistency improve for this next match, he should have the slight edge.
Yeah, I think Bobby's going to use the Hong Kong special onto WhiteCat here. He's going to be picking some tech. I think he's going to be picking some gimmick. I think he's going to be using that as his main source of picks. And if WhiteCat does not ban out that Nomad 6 hidden 2, I think he's probably going to get some 2 free points on that. But obviously, it's always the WhiteCat question. Is he going to practice? Is he going to care? He's one of the best players of all time. So if he cares, then you have to edge the match over to him. But I think in the current scenario that we're probably expecting, I would probably edge this match very slightly in favor of Swaggi. But it all just comes down to that. Like, is he going to care? Is he going to practice?
That is the question. I do think this is a harder match not to care about. I mean, the first matchup versus Demonica was a lot closer than everyone was expected. But, if you're WhiteCat, you look at the seeding, you go, okay, 5th seed versus 12th seed. This one should be a pretty easy win. Not going to worry too much about practicing. And having a close match against Demonica might be a little bit of a wake-up call that you can't really get through this tournament not practicing. If he does opt not to practice these pools, he's going to be dropped into this tournament very, very quickly by the players that are putting more effort in. And so I think if he is hoping to go far in this tournament, this is the round against a player like Swaggi that we are going to see him start to practice much harder.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last year what happened to him against Akoro dropping WhiteCat out of the tournament in loser's bracket by an intense tiebreaker match that I casted, but it's just, all the questions we mentioned. But now we're going to move on to our next matchup here. We've got Emrak versus Chiken. Now, this, I think, is a really, really difficult matchup for Chiken. Obviously, Chiken has some of the best strengths in the game. I would kind of actually call him more the opposite of MCY, where on the speed and the hard rock, Chiken is just so good. He's taken out some of the best players in the game, only picking speed and hard rock, as well as aim, being a pretty good flex skill set for him. But when you're going up against pretty much the best speed aim player that the game has really ever seen, I think it's going to be a little bit rough for Chiken here.
Yeah, and I think Chiken can compete with Emrak on these, speed and stamina picks, specifically because we are kind of early enough in the tournament that I don't think either the DT2 or the Nomad 5 are going to be so ridiculously hard that Emrak has that skill cap advantage. But even then, Chiken's best picks are just as good for Emrak, and so it's going to be really tricky for Chiken, and he's going to need to be really, really consistent if he wants to take those points off of Emrak. Whereas Emrak has a much clearer advantage on things like aim and tech, and so it's kind of similar, in my mind, to the Malachevsky Zuri matchup, where it feels like Chiken does have good options, but his good options are going to be fairly close and contested, whereas Emrak's good options feel a little bit more one-sided.
Yeah, for sure. And also, one thing that this is hidden knowledge that I have pretty much just inferred on my own is that Emrak might actually be motivated for this tournament. I know it's a strange thing to see him motivated for tournaments, but with map pools that are getting as hard as this, I think they've excited him a little bit. So we're going to see if Emrak maybe practices the pool? Question mark?
That'd be a good start.
Yeah, it would be a good start, but his talent can take him a long way. I think, I mean, it would be disrespectful to say I think he can beat Chiken even if he doesn't practice, but
I'd agree.
It's an uphill battle by all means for Chiken. It's, as you said, pretty similar to Zuri versus Malachevsky, where you just have a skill set you're really good at, but the other guy, who's one of the best in the world, is better. And I think it's simple as that.
I mean, that's what it's going to come down to so much in this tournament. As good as so many of the players are, sometimes you go up against, one of the 3 best players in the world, and it doesn't matter how good you are. Sometimes there's not much you can do against that.
Yeah, it's like we're basically saying like who's a good NBA player. Like say you're putting Julius Randle up against LeBron James. Like Julius Randle's a really good player and can hit some really nice shots, but you're up against freaking LeBron James. Like, what are you gonna do? That's pretty much how I look at this matchup.
So, for our final matchup of the quarterfinals, we have got Rimuru versus Kriller, and I think this is going to be another really good one. We could potentially see this one being very close.
Yeah, and I mean, Rimuru was Ninerik's opponent. Ninerik unfortunately forfeiting that match, so we haven't seen much of Rimuru in this tournament yet. Obviously, seeding 3 out of qualifiers, has very high skill cap. I think going to be able to pick that into Kriller, probably going to pick the DTs. But as we've seen from Kriller in this last matchup against MCY, he is able to play those DTs and those speeds. I think it's really going to be a gimmick versus mechanics battle when it comes to these two.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we're going to see Rimuru try and pick some of these more alt-focused maps. Rimuru did look very good on the alt pick in qualifiers, whereas that was one of Kriller's kind of worst maps over qualifiers. So, things like the No Mod 3, even potentially the Hard Rock 3, I feel could be strong picks for Rimuru into Kriller. Whereas Kriller, I think we're going to see focus more on the aim and tech aspect. And speed, I would honestly give Rimuru the edge on speed stamina as well. So, in my mind, this one's a slight advantage to Rimuru. I do also think the stats are a little bit deceptive at the very bottom there in terms of precision. I think Kriller is a very capable precision player, and so while the stats look pretty one-sided, I could honestly see the Hard Rock 2 pick being pretty contested.
I mean, I think a lot of these picks are going to be contested. One thing I'd say feels a little bit more misleading is the reading being in favor of Rimuru. I don't think Rimuru is going to want to leave any reading open against Kriller. I think we could definitely expect that No Mod 6 hit into ban coming out from Rimuru. But other than that, I think he has a shot at basically every other pick in the pool. I think he's advantaged at DTs and mechanics in general. Kriller probably going to resort to the remaining tech picks in the pool, as you mentioned. Very strong on tech and probably the remaining gimmicks. But I think when it comes to picking aim, it's going to be hard to do that against one of the best aim players in the world. So I think it's definitely going to be a close one. We're going to have to see.
Yeah, I think this is one of those matchups where both of these players have kind of their clear advantages that we've already discussed. There's a lot of matches where both players have overlapping skill sets, but this time around, I think both players have kind of decisive advantages in various skill sets. And so my prediction is that early on in the match, we're going to see picks traded back and forth, and it'll come down to more of those coin flip picks later on in the match. And what that also means is if either of these players do give up a breakpoint early on, I think that's going to be very impactful for the rest of the match, because it's going to be really, really hard to take a breakpoint all throughout.
And when it comes to consistency, I mean, there's been barely any players more consistent than Kriller. If anyone's going to be able to take breakpoints against Rimuru, I think it might just be Kriller, and I think a lot of it also depends on the skill cap. We're getting really high now in terms of star rating, 7.8 star balanced pool. I think probably give Rimuru the edge on the skill cap maps, but still, like Kriller, if Kriller's not skill capped, I think he could actually take this match decisively if he manages to take a breakpoint or two. But we're going to have to see. Probably going to ban out speed against Rimuru, so going to definitely be an interesting one.
Yeah, I do think it might be around too early to have to really worry too much about the Kriller skill cap. I think Kriller has shown that he is very capable of playing some of these higher star maps. And seeing as we're only into quarterfinals, I don't think it'll be too much of a problem.
Yep. Now, I'm pretty sure that is going to be the end of our matchup stream. We have pinged the players with the schedule. If you are a player, check the participants channel. You can see your schedule there. Be sure to get your reschedules in before Thursday, 23:59 UTC. And until then, I guess that's going to be it for this weekend. Round of 16 weekend comes to a close. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I've been Miles, joined by iFlame, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day wherever you are.
Take care.